Hello, my name's Dylan. I wanted to come on here and share a little story with you because 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago, I met God. And I've spent about the last 6, 7 months recovering from that experience and reorientating everything inside of me and outside of me to align with what I experienced then. Um, and through that uh, experience, I have simultaneously discovered that the reason I was able to meet God was because Jesus Christ and his sacrifice on the cross, which is the most beautiful event of all time. Um, so I wanted to give a little, maybe try and do a story of that one from start to finish. Not that it's possible, but I'll do my best because I it was about more or less like eight or so year journey to actually get to that point where I found God. Because I spent from when I left high school, which was about 17, I spent the next, oh, actually, that's like 9 years, searching for the truth of reality, of why do I live, why are we alive, what am I motivated by, what are people motivated by, and I basically discovered first things first that we don't know. People doesn't seem like people know. They're getting jobs and getting married and having children and buying houses for a reason that ultimately often seems to not really fulfill people. Divorces happen, midlife crisis happens, disease, mental illness, and all these things. People, our population, our world is riddled with these things. So I searched deeper because I didn't really see any point in living if I just couldn't. It just wasn't in me. It wasn't possible for me to sign up for that kind of life when I knew it didn't work. I knew that basically people were spiritually dead. And in that knowing, I also sensed something deeper. And so I went out searching for it when I was about 17, finished high school. And I went to university to study psychology. And in psychology, I think I was doing psychology and criminology. And I had a little sort of break in my awareness one moment where I was reading a paper, and then I realized that the information I was reading on this scientific paper had come from somebody else who had a whole bunch of predisposing circumstances and events and thoughts to actually lead them to this conclusion. And even though it may have been, I'm not sure at the time, may have been scientific conclusion, there was still a whole bunch of variables that were personal and opinionated to actually lead that person to say, hey, this is actually the answer to this thing. So it sort of made me realize, like, there's multiple lot of sort of layers to what's going on here. It's not like fact is fact. It's like fact is full of opinion, essentially. So it just opened Pandora's box of questioning the truth more. And that led me, just constant committed seeking to the point of, we'll see. I think next sort of along that line of thought was experimenting with drugs, LSD particularly. My first experience with anything like psychedelic or like mind, no, I guess just obviously spiritual was my LSD trip. And I came back down from that the next day, and I was like, part of my brain was going, it was just a drug, it was just a drug, it was just a drug. But the other part was like, no, it was huge, it was something totally incomprehensible, and I was like, therefore became obsessed with that experience, not in a way that made me take it more, but obsessed with, like, there's a realm, it exists, I know for sure now. I sensed it, I sort of felt it, but I know for sure now I was directly in communion with that realm through LSD. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to discover what that is, but do it sober, because I don't know why exactly. I just knew that sobriety was important, and just to use like these methods of seeking outside of me, I felt like that was sort of infiltrating like the search for truth, because I sort of sensed like like I could find it, like I could be I would find the truth, and part of going back to that experience of reading about someone else's conclusions on a paper was that this guy had a subjective sense of truth, of the facts. And so I started to believe that reality was, or the truth was, a subjective sort of experience. Like, it can only be verified via direct interaction with that thing. And so I sort of become like, ticking over, like, maybe the truth is all within me. And then I started having these memories from childhood where I'd have these sort of weird experiences of, for example, I realized one day when I was a child that there was no way anyone could like scientifically verify whether I was actually speaking English or not, because the idea was like, if I'm speaking English, what if someone's just listening to me and translating it in their brain to their own language, and then when they speak, they're speaking their gobbledygook language, and then it comes to my ears and I'm just translating it back into English and going, well, there's no way I could verify that. So I thought I was like some sort of child genius. And oh, this story is terrible. Because this is what it leads to. This is what this sort of spiritual seeking within myself or within yourself leads to. It leads to becoming sort of a closed container of like, oh, I've got the answer, no one else does. And it's incredibly dangerous beyond understandability. And of course, I never thought any of this was dangerous, and to think like now that I'm calling it dangerous is I would have thought was totally insane. I'm sure people think I'm insane for doing so, but spiritually speaking, it is when you see the light, when now the blinders are gone from my eyes and I actually see through clear sight, or I actually understand the truth. I get what's going on here now, finally. And so anyway, back to, sort of having these revelations that maybe the truth is subjective, right? And if the truth is subjective, then I would start to do these meditations, and in meditation I found it very easy to get to these points of, I used to call it like a 0 point, which is like a point where the external world, myself included, had sort of faded out, and then there was sort of nothing. It's like I had forgotten about the outside world so much, so quieted my mind and my body and my emotions so much so that there was just like zip, blank slate sort of thing. And that was sort of, I touched that in meditation, like I remember sort of like the second or third time I ever sat down and meditated. So I was like, oh, this is what people talk about. This is like what the Buddha's on about. And so I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at this meditation thing. And what would start to happen in those zones was like something else would elucidate itself. Something else would sort of appear from that film of nothingness. And that, I mean, is a way to map it, I guess, was the spiritual realm. And I started to sort of commune with that realm, like, again, without drugs, just with my own faculties and my own sort of natural capability. So that was obviously super interesting. And I used to like sort of get quite a thrill of having these spiritual experiences in my meditation. And it got to a point where I was just, well, I mean, it got further than this point, and you'll see, but it got to a point where I could just like bring upon spiritual experience in every meditation, and without, it was just a given. And so I would end up starting to see like these visions and go on these journeys of, you can call it all kinds of things, and people do, and I did call it all kinds of things, like shamanic journeys and astral projection, people call it, or astral travel. I never liked that one, or multi-dimensional travel, or just cosmic nonsense. So I used to just basically do this regularly, on a regular basis, and then I would also be taught by certain teachers. I'd also have certain teachers, and I would follow or we'd have group meditations, right? And they would facilitate these kinds of journeys, some with different styles than others, but ultimately what I discovered every time, or even the first times I'd go to those sort of ceremonies or events, was like I could just get way further, way quicker, and do way more than the person next to me or than everyone in that scene. And I was like, oh, I'm talented, or I have some sort of like spiritual knack or spiritual opening that other people don't have. And I sort of put that down to, well, one, that I'm the best, I'm the creative reality, I'm essentially God. But two, which isn't true, just anyway. What else did I put it down to? Oh yeah. So leading up to that point was like a couple of years, and the couple of years were, the way I found search for truth was to destroy what wasn't truth. So everything, essentially, I believed wasn't the truth. So all of my, I guess, conditioning from my family and from my society and from my culture, and that sort of manifested itself in thoughts and emotions and beliefs. And so as I was going through university, I was also just not believing anything and just of my own stuff, and I would just sort of decondition myself essentially mentally so that I could have this sort of nice blank slate, which is actually essentially what I did, which then led me up to meditation. And then in meditation, it was easy for me to get to that blank slate spot, because it's like I had done years of self-destruction, mental, emotional self-destruction, which was like, to clean that blank slate, and so that I could see clearly into the spiritual realm. And that happened, right? Which was, was awesome, really. Ultimately, it was like, to go to a point where, not ultimately it wasn't awesome, but to a point it was awesome, because I could have insight to things that maybe I shouldn't have insight with. I would talk to spirits, and I would go on spiritual journeys, and I would be able to enter my own self, so to speak, and different aspects of myself, and illuminate them in visual ways that I was like almost tangibly there, like traveling to these like scenes, like mystical scenes, and then interacting with the mystical scene. Whether that was like, well, I'll give you an example. Like I would, so there's the system of the chakra system, right? So it's like there's like 7, or there's way more than 7, right? But these like zones in our body, like here and here and here and here and here and down, and each of them are they're like spiritual zones or energy centers, and you could focus on them, and I could focus on them and then go into them, and depending on what my experience of reality was at that time, it would reflect whatever my experience of reality was based on the chakra. So if I was like one of these lower ones at my belly would represent things like sexuality and money and those sort of, it's so weird, like those sort of more like human sort of level things. And so whatever my relationship with those things was, when I would go into my meditation and purposely send my attention to that area of my body and then go into that sort of spiritual zone, I would be met with like a scene, almost like from a myth, and full of symbol, and that would reflect my experience on the outside world with, say, money. And so maybe one day I was having a terrible time with money for weeks or months or something, and I would go into that and I would see like a house on fire, for example, and that would be correlated with a certain feeling. And what I would do to heal that or to rectify that situation, I would say put the house, put the fire out, sorry, and then get rid of the house, rebuild a beautiful house, and it's shining and glorified and awesome. And then I would come out of that spiritual scene, and then that would change the way, in that very moment, how I was relating to that particular problem in my life, in this case, money. But I could do this with any problem in my life, or any aspect of my reality. I could go into, look at, and change, and then come back out, and it would change on the outside. So the basic mechanism or belief system that was powering this sort of spiritual power was, well, a lot of people, I don't like this because I never used to use this term because I was always a purist, but people call it like law of attraction. But essentially what law of attraction, from my perspective anyway, did, like I did all this and then I heard of law of attraction sort of thing. I was like, oh yeah, I do that. That just basically means like attracts like. My energy reflects outside of me. My internal energy reflects external energy. And energy, when it's moving at a certain rate, vibrates, and it manifests into physical reality. And that's actually the nature of creation. And you can see why I'm, now we're sort of starting to touch closer and closer to, well, if that's the nature of creation and I understand it and I can manipulate it, then what does that make me? Makes me God, makes me the creator of reality. and this is like in the New Age movement, like this is essentially the dogma that's circulated, and some people take it a little bit, some people take a lot. I'm kind of like all in kind of dude, and I was like, hey, if this is what we're talking about here, then I'm not just going to say that, oh, I influence reality or my thoughts create reality. It's like, no, I'm the creator, like simple, and fully like try and harness that, and I did. So yeah, going back to the spiritual scenes I could go into, I would sort of, the idea was that they're actually the symbolic representation of the energy that is creating reality. So I would go into those symbolic representations, change it, which would change the energy, which would change the reality. And the interesting thing about this is it appears to work. It validates itself in the world. And I say appears because it has no actual substance, has no actual grounded truth or ultimate truth. It's a deception, and it's the original deception, which interestingly sort of stayed in the back of my mind for many years. Was the original deception in the Garden of Eden, where the serpent tricks man and woman into believing if they eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, i.e. the tree of knowledge, the tree of understanding reality, then they will become like gods. And that was the promise the serpent made, and then they ate it, and thus mankind fell because it tried to know, it tried to understand. And that always stuck with me, without realizing like the total weird hypocrisy or of it sticking with me and knowing that verse, and also like falling into the same trap, but not just falling, indulging myself totally in that trap. So I guess I didn't see it as a trap. I just saw it as like, well, that's the key to finding meaning. Because that was the original problem. I saw a world without meaning, a world that was spiritually void, a world that was dead, a world that was full of disease and depression. And I wanted to help solve that problem. So I was trying to find out the medication for the sort of situation, I guess, the medication of the predicament of the human condition, which I now discovered is Jesus Christ. And the atonement for that fall or the error of humans is already done and made for, and so all of this effort in order to like re-atone or fix the problem is one, impossible, because we're not capable. We are the problem. So how can we possibly fix the problem? And two, already done. And through faith, we find wholeness, and through faith we find that heaven on earth, or that heaven, which ironically is a New Age, and a thing I used to sort of talk about in practice was the idea that we're the ultimate goal here is to the reality I really want to create. Though I want to get my personal life right and my personal little reality right, really I want to create a better reality for everyone. So that was my ultimate, more bigger picture reason while I was doing this stuff. So that led me to, a lot of practice teachers, spending a lot of money on teachers, and interacting with people, my community and such, and to the point where I was then facilitating these kinds of experiences for people, and simultaneously facilitating this experience for planet Earth, right? So I was helping heal planet Earth, helping change the reality or the spirituality of physical locations on planet Earth. So I would be drawn to places and told from the spirits I was talking to, go to this place and do this thing, and I'd get there and I would become clear what I have to do, and similar, like I'm saying, when I always go in myself, I'd see a scene and I'd fix the scene up. So I'd go to places and I would go into that meditation state and sort of change the reality, supposedly, of that location on planet Earth. And so ultimately, the goal was then to rebirth a new Earth. So that's like a term that sort of moves around in that circle, in those sort of spiritual New Age circles. Create a new Earth, or heaven on Earth, these kinds of things. Which is just interestingly correlate to Book of Revelation, because what I now see is that like a lot of the New Age stuff is obviously a mishmash of pagan and Buddhist and Hindu beliefs, but it's also the huge backbone of it is stolen from Christianity, and that story. So I started doing work for people and facilitating like one-on-one sort of, I don't know what they call them. I don't know exactly, but I would guide people through into themselves and to illuminate something that they were desiring to illuminate, whether they knew it or not. Like I would be connecting with their spirits and their higher self and all of this total spiritual deception. This is total, like everything I'm talking about is just a one big veil of lies, which is hard for someone to hear, and impossible, in fact, for someone to hear within that veil. So, like me speaking to myself a year ago, I don't know actually. Sometimes I think if I spoke to myself properly, I would be like, oh yeah, the case for Christ is obvious, or I've sort of more sense that it would be more like, yeah, cool, that's awesome. I'm glad you found your truth there, future Dylan, and this sort of like, this is just my idea of what the truth is now. Jesus is just my idea of what the truth is, and not like some sort of objective truth, because all of this is fundamentally pinned upon this idea of subjective truth, which is obviously just like stupid, because like if someone punches someone or someone commits a murder or an atrocity, everyone can get together and go, that is wrong, like not, and the idea that someone can have a subjective opinion that suggests that isn't wrong or bad is, well, I mean, of course it's possible. Someone can put themselves up and say, no, it's actually fine. You know what Hitler did? Yeah, it was actually not too bad. I mean, from this angle, if you look at it from this perspective, like the whole atrocity in Nazi Germany, not too bad. It's like someone can do that, but that person would be evil, so it's a sort of some like the discounting of objective truth is insanity, and that's actually, I'm also quite interested in mental health, and I have quite a few connections in that sort of realm, and that's kind of like where like these people that are in like these like mentally ill states they're in these really confined realms of subjective truth that are in a fractured ocean of the spiritual realm that is tormenting them and tormenting the way they see reality, and I'm not meaning to make a connection between the New Age and mental illness, but so what happened as I'm on this spiritual journey? How did I find God, right? Well, I got to a point where I was facilitating this for other people, and I was basically realizing I was coming to I had answered the questions I started with, and I was continuing having questions, but I just couldn't get all the answers and the revelation and the spiritual experience that I was seeking. So it got to a point where I was like, well, I've kind of came and done what I came for, personally, and then this was being also same time simultaneously true for what I came for globally, because I got to a point where I ended up being part of this huge spiritual event for the planet, where that was centering upon Uluru, and this happened last December, and so we're getting to the part of the story where it gets a bit crossovery. So it's like, if this is the timeline, it sort of gets a bit like this. If this was my old life and this is my new life, it sort of gets a bit like this. And right in the middle there is Uluru. So I just want to talk about Uluru, because what happened was I participated in a ceremony with these indigenous people at Uluru that was sort of foretold for time immemorial, right? There was a ceremony that needed to happen, needed to be completed, because I think it's the story something like, upon original creation, ceremony was disturbed, so it needed to be completed now so that we could have a new creation, ergo, new Earth. And so this ceremony at this time, with the Saturn and Jupiter aligning and the solstice aligning and all of the stars and stuff and all of the spiritual energy, and was all happening at Uluru, because Uluru was the center point of the Earth as far as the spiritual layout of planet Earth. was concerned, it was all hinging upon this point on planet Earth, and also this time, and also this indigenous knowledge. So it was all coming together, and I was, led there by my spirit guides to be there and to witness what happened and facilitate what happened. And what happened was specifically, or exactly what I had always dreamed of happening, which was we gave birth to a new spirit that was thus going to, in time in the future, manifest the new earth. And so, having done this ceremony, I had fully completed everything I set out to do spiritually, everything. And I literally, like, moments after that ceremony, I fell down on the floor and cried, because I was like, wow, my life is complete. My mission is complete. Hallelujah, so good. I don't know how I'm going to go on. In fact, I thought I was about to die, because, let's go back a month, I actually had left on that journey to Uluru, and I said, I think I'm finished my spiritual journey, so the only thing left now is to hand it over to God. And so I said, God, you know what, I guess I'm done. Like, whatever you want, I want your will. And this is where everything changed. Because I thought I knew what God was. I had my own idea of God. Yes, God was essentially me, or maybe it was like I was a fraction of God, or maybe God was just a big old energy soup or spiritual soup that I was playing in all those years. But what actually happened, because I was really sincere and I did give up my old desires, I said, God, I want what you want now. 2 days later, as I literally physically started this journey to Uluru and to complete this mission, just before I get to 2 days later, I had already had a sense that after Uluru, there was nothing. Like, I would read the energy of the future, and there was no energy there. And I would just get this vision every time. I would try and go, what's going to happen after December? What's going to happen in January 2021? And I would just get this vision of these golden gates opening, and like fluffy white clouds and golden light. And it was sort of saying, it would say to me, Heaven's Gates. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, part of me thought it said Heaven's Gates, and it was, the more information I got was something like everything you've ever dreamed of. And I was like, oh, great, I think reality is just going to be this big, beautiful flowing of heavenly light, and I'm going to be the conduit for it all. And hallelujah, I'll heal people, and we'll just all bring in the new earth. But also, leading up to that point in time, I actually got afraid, because I thought it also meant I was going to die. Because I couldn't see any, like, reality beyond that date. So I got closer and closer to that date, and at one point, I got so close that, or so, like, caught up with this idea that maybe I was going to die. I started crying, and I was mourning myself, and I even recorded an obituary for myself, and saying goodbye to loved ones and such as I thought I was going to die. Little did I know, technically I did die, because what I was actually had the premonition for was my new life. So my old life was dying. I did die, and I have been born again since then. A true, real, actual spiritual rebirth, not these sort of like ego rebirths or these New Age spirituality sort of teaches, or Buddhism teaches these ideas of reincarnation or rebirths. Like, a real rebirth actually happened. So that old life did die, and I have been born again since. But, so going back to oh God, I want what you want now. 2 days later, for 3 days, or still today, actually, the experience is still available to me today, because I met the Holy Spirit through the Father, and I can't describe this unless you have a spiritual sense. And basically, it's like I realized that God, for the first time, was not me at all, at all. Like, it was totally independent of me, and it was like seeing this. It was like God became outside of me and penetrated all of my reality, and He was away. He was away from me. He was almost like over there, up beyond the atmosphere, and He sort of came down and said, reveal Himself to me. And everything, all my thoughts and my feelings and my practice and everything that was going on in my brain at that moment, or in those moments, was just like, I couldn't grasp it at all. Like, I had all of this beautiful vernacular for multi-dimensional travel and galactic this and cosmic that, and none of that. And I had hundreds, if not thousands, of spiritual experiences leading up to that particular spiritual experience. None of that was floating. None of that was like holding any water in those moments. And I know now why. It was all being like washed away. It was all being cleansed. And so everything, I stopped meditating from that day. I stopped eating that diet. I stopped doing those practices that I used to do to keep my energy levels up. All of that stuff just totally just like fell away with this experience. And the only thing, it was like this being in the sky almost, and it was the only thing I could bring it down to earth with was to bring it into the Bible, because I had sort of heard of the Jehovah, many years ago, and sort of I'd already had some sort of relationship, some sort of connection with his character, and I knew what I was experiencing was this God, and I was like, wow, this is the God of the Bible. And I sort of avoided the Bible because I sort of had my own ideas of it, that it was corrupted by man, and I didn't want it to corrupt my spiritual experience. Again, it's kind of like that purist inside of me that didn't want to be infected by something, just wanted the direct experience. So as I was having this experience, all of me was just like lost in it, and it was beautiful. It was totally beautiful, because there was this perfect divine existence that I was now connected to, that had everything for me already done, everything for everyone already done, already perfect, or the plan is already complete. And I knew this in this moment, and it was totally fulfilling. All of my questions, everything was answered. I can't like describe it. Everything was totally fulfilled in that moment. Like it's like everything was fulfilled, and there was no emptiness. And all I was be thinking about, what is, like, this is God, Jesus, God and Jesus, and it was just like for days, just Jesus, and I was just like, what is going on? What is going on? Like, is it really Jesus? It's this is God from the Bible, and it's because Jesus. It's just because Jesus. It's because of Jesus. And I didn't. My theology wasn't really anything at that point, but I just knew that I was meeting God because of Jesus. And now I look back and I go, I was actually also being filled with the Holy Spirit. But the idea of relationship with Jesus wasn't there at that time, and wasn't there for a good month, I'd say. And then, so yeah, here's the timeline. Meet God, and still haven't gone to Uluru yet, and I was on this physical journey towards Uluru, which, if you don't know, is the centre of Australia, and battling with this like new revelation of the truth, like holy crap. And yeah, but also like sort of indulging a little bit in my spiritual journey and my spiritual sort of like healing the land sort of thing up until Uluru. And then once Uluru happened, I had finished my spiritual journey, and I knew that for sure, because I'd finished all my personal desires, and then I'd finished all the desires for the planet. So I was like, wow, okay. The next day came, and I was like, I'm still alive. I'm done with my life, and I just had an awesome day talking with friends. And then the next day came, and I was like, well, I'm still alive. Like all I can think of to do now is to go to church. And I had a church that I knew of over in Perth, the Western Australia, which was like, what is it? It's like 3,000 kilometers away. And so I just wanted to be at that service, which was a Sunday. I think this was like a Wednesday. And so I knew of that church because my brother went there, and I'd been there about 3 or 4 times in the last 5 or 6 years. And I went to that church. I basically drove from Uluru to church. And I was just so elated. And I think on the way, I was sort of like, I knew the people from church, and I was sort of like, they can't be my people. Surely they're not my people. Are they my people? Am I going to church? I just knew, I didn't know really exactly what was going on. I just knew I had to go there. And then I listened to the message, and throughout, like, moments in, like, I was just in tears the whole time. The whole service goes for, like, over an hour. And then, the worship music, that's right. The worship song was the same worship song I had listened to back then. And it just totally destroyed me. And then at the end, they did an altar call where they're like, if you want to give your life to God. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is obvious. It wasn't even my choice. It was just like pouring everything I had out. at the feet of Christ, and in that realizing, or in this sort of journey, realizing that if this is the truth, what have I been practicing this whole time? If the truth is actually outside of me, if it's not reliant upon me and how I feel and what I think, and what have I been practicing this whole time? And that was a interesting one to face, because to realize like there's a spiritual truth, it's pure, it's real. I almost describe it like the Holy Spirit is like the Rolex, and any other spirituality that I experienced up until then was like a plastic watch. And that's how it's not how I know it's real, but it's just like, it's real. Whereas the other stuff was sort of phony. It wasn't fake. It wasn't really. So, and as a result, I've reorientated myself in life massively, and actually found like my moral compass to be, revived and back alive, and realizing like, oh, there is actually like a right way and a wrong way, and and it's not about me anymore. It's not about how I feel or what I think is the truth, or what I prefer the truth to be, or what I prefer the way I should, or the way I want to act to the way I actually should act, because there's, right and wrong and on a big scale, but also on a nuanced scale of like how to relate to people, and how to serve others, and how to love, and all these things that like totally reorientated now for me. And so it's been about 6 months since 7 months since that church service, and it's been a real battle. Like the first 3 or 4 months was like the spirits, all the spirits I was obviously communing with before did not like that I had now committed myself to Jesus, and I had multiple experiences of just like, well, spiritual attack, but to make it understandable for you, it was more like psychotic experience. It was more like the world turning against me sometimes, and putting pressure on my body, putting pressure on my mind, and feeding me thoughts that of like, and dreams of just horrific things, and having no real idea of what thought to believe and what not to believe. It was like that whole time the devil was speaking to me, God was speaking to me, I was speaking to me, and I believed none of it. So it was very unstable, and thankfully I had a lot of grace through the people around me in my circumstance to allow me to go through that, up until this point where I'm a bit more, okay, like I can function in the world. Like now, the massive experience I had has been sort of disseminated, and I can now turn it into something that's like a relative way of like, okay, this is how I should act, this is what I should focus on, this is what I should be motivated by, this is what I should do this for. But up until then, I haven't really had an idea of my left and right, you could say, or my position in the world. But throughout all of that, my connection, that original experience, is always, and still right now, and will be forever, available to me. Like my access to God, my ability to turn to God and know that He's there. He has a character. He has a sense. He has a visceral. He's there, and he's illuminated Himself through people, through the Bible, through history, and also through direct revelation, direct thought, direct communion, through prayer, and these kinds of things, through worship. And it's like I'm not alone. Like I'm not alone anymore. I'm not, like, the room isn't empty. It's not just me in the room anymore. Me and God are in the room, and I know that, and it's just there. It's just like, which is just like the most fulfilling thing, because it answers all questions. It calms all worries. It gives peace beyond peace and joy beyond joy, and in that I'm totally safe. In that I can totally abandon myself in moments, and give myself over to that, which just was all I was looking for from day one. It was all I was looking for, and I found it, and yeah, I'm not searching anymore. I'm not looking for that next spiritual hit. I'm not looking for that next spiritual teaching or lesson or experience or and I'd also like to add that a lot of my things that were weighing me down over those years just have gone, like addictions and oppressive ways of mine and habits of mine. Through the power that is not my own, they just lifted off, which is just the blessing of knowing God and knowing that I'm not the one in control anymore, and I'm not the one that has to do everything. I'm not the one that has to create reality the right way, or meditate in the right way, or communicate in the right way, or everything's going to be screwed up. It's like it's not up to me anymore. There's huge spiritual relief that I experienced that I previously didn't know I could experience, or didn't have like the contrast to know that it actually exists. So yeah, thanks all for listening. I don't know what else to say, except, I see I could talk forever. But I won't. I'll leave it at that story. And now I shall go.